He stood in the doorway and couldn't believe what he was seeing. His daughter, the little girl who hadn't eaten in 2 weeks, was chewing. He covered his mouth. Tears poured down his face, and all he could think was, how? Terrence Williams lost his wife 6 months ago. Jasmine died from complications after surgery. No warning, just gone. Their 3-year-old daughter, Mara, didn't understand death. She just knew her mommy wasn't coming back. And something inside her broke. She stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped smiling, and 2 weeks ago, she stopped eating. Terrence hired the best doctors in London, child psychologists, feeding specialists, people who'd spent their whole careers helping children. None of them could reach her. Amara just sat there getting thinner every day, staring at nothing. Her father would sit with her for hours, begging her to eat, promising her anything, but she wouldn't even look at him. Mrs. Baptiste, the Trinidadian woman who'd helped raise Amara, cried every time she saw the little girl fading away. Terrence was a tech mogul. He could buy anything in the world, but he couldn't save his daughter. Then one morning, a new caregiver arrived at the house. Her name was Zora. She was young, quiet, and came from Brixton where people didn't have much. When Mrs. Baptiste told her about Amara, Zora didn't look shocked. She looked understanding. Because when Zora was 7, her mother died, too, and she remembered what it felt like to not want to live anymore. That afternoon, Zora went upstairs to Amara's room. She didn't force her to eat. She just sat with her, and she told Amara about her own mother, about grief, about missing someone so much it hurts to breathe. Amara's eyes flickered just for a second. The next morning, Zora made something simple. Just cornbread with butter and a little honey. Nothing fancy. She sat down next to Amara and started eating it herself. Amara watched, and then for the first time in 2 weeks, she reached out her hand. Terrence was downstairs when Mrs. Baptiste ran in, barely able to speak. She's eating. He didn't believe it. He ran up the stairs and froze in the doorway. There was his daughter holding a piece of cornbread, chewing slowly, tears streaming down her face. And sitting beside her was a woman he barely knew. Before we begin, click subscribe and hit that like button. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because if you ever felt helpless watching someone you love fade away, you need to see what happens next. Sometimes God sends help from the last place you'd expect. Zora's first morning in the house started before sunrise. She took the overground from Brixton, watching London wake up through foggy windows. By the time she reached the townhouse in Notting Hill, the sky was turning gray over the rooftops. Mrs. Baptiste let her in through the back entrance. The kitchen was bigger than Zora's entire flat. Everything gleamed, marble counters, brass fixtures, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Outside, the private garden looked like something from a magazine. Mrs. Baptiste didn't say much, just handed her an apron and pointed to the cutting board. "Breakfast first," she said quietly, for the girl. Zora washed her hands and started chopping fruit. The knife made soft sounds against the board. Everything else was silent. No TV playing, no music, no voices, just silence. After a while, Mrs. Baptiste came back with a tray. On it was a small plate of scrambled eggs, toast cut into triangles, and a glass of orange juice. Zora watched her arrange it carefully, like she was preparing something sacred. "Does she ever ask for anything?" Zora said. Mrs. Baptiste shook her head. "She doesn't talk anymore at all. Not since her mother died." Zora's chest tightened. She knew that kind of silence, the kind that swallows you whole. Mrs. Baptiste picked up the tray and headed toward the stairs. Zora kept working, but her mind was somewhere else. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Baptiste came back down. The tray was untouched. She set it on the counter without a word, then walked to the sink and stood there staring out the window. Zora dried her hands. "How long has this been going on?" 2 weeks since she stopped eating completely, but she's been disappearing for months. Disappearing. Mrs. Baptiste turned to her, eyes red. "You'll see." Upstairs, a door opened and closed. Footsteps moved across the floor above them. Slow, heavy. "That's Mr. Williams," Mrs. Baptiste whispered. "He's been working from home since this started. Doesn't leave her side for long." Zora nodded. A few minutes later, He appeared in the doorway, tall, sharp suit, even though it was barely 7 o'clock in the morning. His locks were pulled back neat, but his face looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't look at Zora, just poured himself coffee from the pot and stood by the window, staring out at nothing. Zora kept her voice gentle. "Good morning, sir." He glanced over like he'd forgotten anyone else was there. "You're the new hire," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Zora Chambers. He nodded once, then looked back out the window. "How long do you think you'll last?" The words weren't meant to be cruel. They were just tired. Zora met his eyes. "As long as she needs me to." For a second, something flickered across his face. Not hope, just surprise. Then he set down his cup and walked out. Mrs. Baptiste let out a long breath. "He's a good man," she said quietly, "but he doesn't know how to fight something he can't control." Zora looked at the untouched breakfast tray on the counter. She thought about Amara upstairs, about a little girl who'd stop eating because the world stopped making sense. And she thought about her own mother, about being 7 years old and not understanding why God would take someone you loved. She whispered under her breath, so soft Mrs. Baptiste couldn't hear, "I don't know how to do this, Lord, but if you brought me here, don't let me waste it." Upstairs, Amara sat on the floor of her room, knees pulled to her chest, staring at a picture on the wall. In it, her mother was smiling, her beautiful dark skin glowing, her natural hair in twists. Amara hadn't smiled in 6 months. She didn't know someone downstairs was praying for her. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she couldn't name, something stirred, just barely, like the first breath before waking up. Zora spent the rest of that morning learning the rhythm of the house. She wiped down counters that were already spotless, organized cabinets that didn't need organizing, kept her hands busy while her mind stayed upstairs. Around 10, Mrs. Baptiste brought down another tray, still untouched. Zora glanced at the eggs, now cold and hard, the toast dry at the edges, the juice sitting in the glass like it had given up. Mrs. Baptiste scraped everything into the trash without a word. Zora watched her. What does she do all day? Sits in her room, stares at the walls. Sometimes she looks at pictures of her mother. Mrs. Baptiste's voice cracked. "That's all." "Does her father go up there?" "Every few hours. He talks to her, reads to her, begs her." She shook her head, but she doesn't respond. It's like she's not even there anymore. Zora's throat tightened. She knew that feeling, the one where you're still breathing, but you're not really alive. You're just waiting for the pain to stop, or waiting to stop feeling anything at all. She turned back to the sink, scrubbing a pan that didn't need scrubbing. "God, I don't know what you want to do here, but please show me." Around noon, Terrence came down again. He moved like someone carrying weight no one else could see. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched. He stood at the counter, staring at his phone, but Zora could tell he wasn't reading anything. His eyes weren't moving. She set a plate in front of him, a sandwich she'd made. Nothing fancy, just turkey and cheese. He looked at it like he'd forgotten what food was. "You should eat, sir," she said gently. He almost smiled. Almost. That's what I keep telling her. It's different when someone reminds you you're not alone. He looked up at her then. Really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. "You lost someone," he said. It wasn't a question. Zora nodded. "My mother when I was 7. "And you stopped eating too?" "For a while, until my grandmother sat with me every single day and reminded me I was still here for a reason." Terrence's eyes filled. He looked away quickly, but not before she saw it. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I've tried everything." Zora's voice was soft but steady. "Maybe she doesn't need you to fix it. Maybe she just needs you to sit in it with her." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the sandwich and took a bite. Not because he was hungry, but because someone had reminded him he wasn't alone either. Upstairs, Amara pulled her knees tighter to her chest. She could hear voices below, faint, distant. She used to run downstairs when she heard her father's voice. Now she just stayed still, waiting. For what? She didn't know. But somewhere deep inside, a part of her was listening. That afternoon, the light through the windows turned soft and golden. Zora was drying dishes when Mrs. Baptiste came in with the dinner tray. A small bowl of soup, crackers, apple slices cut into stars. Zora watched her arrange everything just so. "Mrs. Baptiste," she said quietly, "can I take it up this time?" Mrs. Baptiste stopped, looked at her. "That's not necessary." "I know." Zora's voice was steady. "But I'd like to try." Mrs. Baptiste studied her face. There was something in Zora's eyes. Not arrogance, not pity, just calm. Finally, she nodded. "If Mr. Williams finds out and gets upset, I can't protect you." "I understand." Zora lifted the tray with both hands. The stairs felt longer than they should have. Each step carried weight, not from the tray, but from what waited at the top. The second-floor hallway was lined with photographs. Amara as a baby. Amara laughing at a park. Amara in her mother's arms. Both of them smiling like nothing bad could ever happen. Zora's chest ached. She stopped outside Amara's door. It was cracked open just an inch. She knocked softly. "Amara, my name's Zora. I brought your dinner." Silence. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was lavender, filled with toys no one had touched in months. Stuffed animals lined up on shelves, a dollhouse in the corner, perfectly arranged, and on the floor, sitting with her back against the bed, was Amara. Zora's breath caught. The little girl looked so small, so fragile, like if you spoke too loud, she might disappear. Her coils hung loose around her face. Her eyes stared at nothing. Zora set the tray down on the dresser, not in front of Amara, not close to her, just nearby. Then she pulled a chair over, but not too close. 5 feet away, maybe 6. She sat down, and for a long time, she didn't say anything, just sat there quiet, breathing the same air. Minutes passed. The light from the window shifted. Finally, Zora spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You know, Amara, you don't have to eat if you don't want to." Amara's eyelashes flickered. Just barely. Zora kept her voice soft. "My grandma used to say that when someone's heart hurts too much, food doesn't taste right anymore. Like everything in your mouth feels wrong, like it doesn't belong there." Amara's head turned just a fraction of an inch. "I lost my mama when I was 7, Zora said. "And after she died, I didn't want to eat either. Nothing made sense anymore. I kept thinking, why should I eat when she can't?" Silence. Then so quiet, Zora almost missed it. "Your mama died?" Zora's eyes filled. "Yes, baby, she did." Amara turned her head a little more. Looked at her. "Mine, too." Zora nodded slowly. "I know. Mrs. Baptiste told me. I'm so sorry." Amara stared at her. Really looked at her, like she was trying to see if Zora was telling the truth. "Did it hurt?" Amara whispered. Zora didn't lie. "Every single day." "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes, but not the same way." Zora leaned forward just slightly. "It gets softer, like it's still there, but it doesn't cut as deep." Amara's lip trembled, and for the first time in 2 weeks, something in her eyes changed. Not happiness, not relief, just recognition, like she'd finally found someone who understood. "Will you stay?" Amara whispered. Zora's voice broke. "As long as you want me to." Outside the door, Mrs. Baptiste stood with both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And downstairs, Terrence sat at his desk, staring at nothing. He didn't know that upstairs, for the first time in months, his daughter had spoken. Zora couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about Amara, about those hollow eyes, about the way she whispered, "Mine too," like it was a secret she'd been carrying alone. The next morning, Zora arrived before the sun came up. London was still dark, street lights reflecting off empty sidewalks. She let herself into a back-in trance and stood in the quiet kitchen, thinking. All those untouched meals, all that expensive food prepared by people who knew nutrition but didn't know Amara. Zora opened the fridge, moved past the organic vegetables, the imported cheeses, the carefully labeled containers, and reached for the simple things. Cornmeal, butter, honey. She heard footsteps behind her. Mrs. Baptiste stood in the doorway, surprised. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," Zora said. Mrs. Baptiste looked at what she was holding. "What are you doing?" Zora set the cornmeal on the counter. "When my grandma was trying to help me after my mama died, she'd make me fancy meals. She made cornbread, just butter, cornmeal, and honey. Nothing special." Mrs. Baptiste's face softened. "I used to make that for Amara before everything fell apart." Mrs. Baptiste nodded, eyes glistening. Zora turned on the oven. "Then maybe that's what she needs. Not something perfect, just something that feels like home." The cornbread started to bake. The smell filled the kitchen. Warm, simple, honest. Mrs. Baptiste wiped her eyes. "Mr. Williams won't like this. There's a meal plan, nutritionist said." "I know what they said." Zora's voice was gentle but firm. "But she's not eating what they planned. So what do we have to lose?" Footsteps on the stairs. Terrence appeared in the doorway, dressed for a run, his locks freshly twisted. He stopped when he smelled the cornbread. "What is that?" His voice was tight. "Breakfast," Zora said calmly. "That's not on the plan." "I know." His jaw clenched. "The doctor said she needs specific nutrients." Zora turned to face him. "The doctor said she's physically fine, but she's not eating what they prescribed. So with respect, sir, what are we losing by trying something different?" Terrence stared at her. Part of him wanted to tell her to stop, to follow the rules, to do what the experts said. But another part, the desperate father who'd watched his daughter fade for 2 weeks, wanted to believe anything might work. "If this doesn't work," he said quietly, "you're done here." Zora met his eyes. "And if it does?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked out. Mrs. Baptiste let out a shaky breath. "You're either very brave or very foolish." Zora cut the cornbread into small squares. "Maybe both." She placed them on a plain white plate. No garnish, no presentation, just food. Real food. The kind that tasted like love. "I'm taking this up to her," Zora said. Mrs. Baptiste nodded slowly. "He'll be watching. You know that, right?" "I know." Zora lifted the plate with both hands. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs. Not from fear of losing her job, but from hope. "Please, God, let this mean something." At Amara's door, she knocked softly. No answer. She pushed it open. Amara was in the same spot as yesterday. Floor by the bed, knees pulled up, staring at nothing. Zora sat down in the same chair, set the plate between them. And then she did something no one expected. She picked up a square and took a bite herself. Amara's eyes moved just slightly toward the food. Zora chewed slowly like she had all the time in the world, like there was nowhere else she needed to be. Amara watched her, eyes following every movement. The room was so quiet Zora could hear her own breathing. She swallowed, then set the square down on the plate between them. "My grandma used to say, cornbread tastes better when you share it with someone you trust." Amara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mommy made this." Zora's chest tightened. "Did she?" Amara nodded. "On Sundays after church." Then she had really good taste. Silence. Amara stared at the plate. Her small hand lifted, then dropped back into her lap. Zora didn't push. Didn't say just try it, or it's good for you. Or any of the things adults say when they're trying to fix something. She just sat there, present. Finally, Amara spoke again. Her voice shook. "If I eat it, will I forget her?" Zora's throat closed. She leaned forward just a little. "No, baby. Eating it means you remember her. Every bite is a memory of Sunday mornings with your mama." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Promise?" "I promise." Amara's hand reached out again. This time it didn't stop. Her fingers were so small they could barely hold the square. She brought it close to her face, smelled it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Zora whispered, "It's okay to cry, Amara. Your mama would want you to remember her this way." Amara opened her mouth and took the tiniest bite. She chewed slowly, eyes squeezed shut, tears falling faster now. She swallowed, and then something inside her shattered. She started sobbing, deep, broken sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside her for months. Zora moved closer, pulled her into her arms. Amara collapsed against her, still holding the cornbread in one hand, clutching Zora's shirt with the other. "I miss her," Amara cried. "I miss Mommy so much." Zora rocked her gently. "I know, baby. I know you do. It hurts." "I know. It hurts so bad." "I know." Amara cried and cried, her whole body shaking. And through it all, Zora just held her. Didn't tell her to stop. Didn't tell her it would be okay. Just held her while she finally let it out. In the doorway, Terrence stood frozen. His hand was over his mouth. Tears poured down his face. He just watched his daughter eat for the first time in 2 weeks. But more than that, he just watched her cry for the first time since the funeral. He thought the silence was the worst thing. But now he understood the silence was her drowning. This, the crying, the breaking, this was her coming up for air. He took a step into the room. Amara saw him through her tears. "Daddy." He dropped to his knees beside them, his voice breaking. "I'm here, sweetheart. Daddy's here." Amara reached for him with her free hand, still holding the cornbread in the other. He took her hand and kissed it over and over like he was trying to make up for every time he hadn't been able to reach her. "I'm eating, Daddy," she whispered, "like Mommy wanted." Terrence couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming. Amara looked at the cornbread, then back at Zora, and she took another bite, then another, each one a choice, each one saying, "I'm still here." Mrs. Baptiste stood in the hallway, both hands pressed over her heart, watching the impossible happen. The child who'd been disappearing was coming back. Not all at once, but bite by bite, breath by breath. Amara finished 2 squares, her first food in 14 days. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen. But there was something different in them now, something that hadn't been there before. Life. She leaned against Zora, her small voice breaking the silence. "Miss Zora." "Yes, baby." "Can we have this every Sunday?" Terrence let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Every single Sunday, sweetheart. I promise." Zora whispered barely loud enough for anyone to hear. "Thank you, God." But even in that moment of breakthrough, something hung in the air, unspoken, unfinished, because Amara had started eating. But no one yet understood why she'd stopped. An hour later, Amara was tucked into bed. Her eyes were heavy, exhausted from crying and eating and feeling everything she kept locked away for so long. Zora sat in the chair beside her, holding her small hand. Terrence stood by the window, his back to them, shoulders shaking. The room was quiet except for Amara's breathing, then so soft it almost disappeared. "Miss Zora?" "Yes, baby." "Why did the doctors try to make me better when I didn't want to be better?" The air went still. Terrence turned from the window. Zora's heart stopped. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Amara's voice was small, honest, the way only a child can be. "I wanted to go to Mommy." Zora couldn't breathe. Terrence took a step closer, his voice breaking. "Amara, what are you saying?" Amara looked at him with those wide, innocent eyes. "Grandma said Mommy went to heaven. So I thought if I stopped eating, I could go there too." The words hung in the air like broken glass. Terrence made a sound, strangled, animal, and pressed his hand to his mouth. Zora's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "Oh, Amara." "I tried really hard," Amara whispered, "but it hurt. My tummy hurt and my head hurt, and I got so tired. But I kept thinking if I just waited a little longer, I'd see her again." Terrence crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside the bed. "Baby," he choked out, "why didn't you tell me?" Amara's lip trembled. "You were always sad, Daddy. You were always working. And when you came home, you looked at me like I made you sadder." The words cut deeper than any knife. "No," Terrence whispered. "No, sweetheart. That's not. After Mommy died, you stopped reading to me. You stopped tucking me in. You were here, but you weren't here." Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe you didn't want me anymore." Terrence pulled her into his arms, his whole body shaking. "God, no. Baby, no. I wanted you. I want you. I was just so scared." "Of what?" "Of losing you the way I lost her." His voice broke completely. "So I worked. I stayed busy. I told myself if I could just provide everything you needed, the best doctors, the best care, I could keep you safe. But I didn't realize he couldn't finish. Amara touched his wet cheek. You left me alone, Daddy. Terrence sobbed into her hair. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Zora sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. This was why Amara stopped eating. Not depression, not illness. A 3-year-old trying to solve her grief the only way that made sense to her. If Mommy's gone, I'll go, too. Amara pulled back, looked at her father. Are you to leave again? Terrence gripped her hands. Never. I swear to you, sweetheart, never again. Promise? I promise. Amara turned to Zora, eyes full of questions. Miss Zora, do you think Mommy wants me in heaven with her? Zora's voice shook. No, baby. I think your mama is watching you from heaven right now, and you know what she wants. What? She wants you to stay here, to grow up, to laugh and play and eat Sunday cornbread. Zora leaned closer. She wants you to live the biggest, most beautiful life you can because that's what mamas want for their babies. Amara's eyes filled again. But I miss her. I know, and you'll always miss her. But missing her and living your life, those two things can happen at the same time. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at her father. Daddy, will you stay with me tonight? Terrence's voice broke. Every night, sweetheart, starting now. But even as he held her, even as she closed her eyes and drifted toward sleep, one question burned in the room. How close had they come to losing her? And what if Zora hadn't arrived when she did? Terrence didn't leave Amara's room that night. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her sleep, terrified that if he looked away, she might disappear. Her breathing was soft and steady. Her hand rested on the blanket, fingers slightly curled. She looked so small, too small to carry the weight she'd been carrying. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Zora appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea. She didn't say anything, just set it on the nightstand and turned to leave. Wait, Terrence whispered. She stopped. He looked at her in the dim light from the hallway. How did you know? Know what? What she needed, what we all needed. Zora was quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I remembered what it felt like to be that alone. Terrence's voice cracked. I let her be alone. You were drowning, too. That's not an excuse. He pressed his palms against his eyes. She thought I didn't want her anymore. My own daughter thought I'd given up on her. Zora sat down in the other chair. You didn't give up. You just didn't know how to reach her. I should have known. His hands dropped. I'm her father. I should have known. You were grieving, too. You lost your wife. You were trying to survive. By abandoning my daughter. By protecting yourself the only way you knew how. Zora's voice was gentle. My grandma used to say, grief makes us do strange things. We push away the people we love most because loving them hurts too much. Terrence stared at Amara's sleeping face. I almost lost her, but you didn't, because a stranger walked into my house and saw what I was too blind to see. Zora shook her head. I'm not the one who saved her. You are. He looked at her, confused. She didn't need me to feed her, Zora said. She needed her father to come back. And tonight you did. Terrence's throat closed. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. When Jasmine died, I told myself I had to be strong. Had to keep everything together. I couldn't fall apart because Amara needed me. He paused. But I was falling apart. Every single day. I just did it where she couldn't see. So she thought you'd moved on. And she thought she had to do the same. Or, his voice broke, or follow her mother. Zora reached over and squeezed his hand. Just once. You're here now, she said. That's what matters. Terrence looked down at their hands. I don't know how to do this. How to be what she needs. You don't have to know. You just have to show up. He nodded slowly. Zora stood. Get some rest. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Zora, she turned. Thank you. His voice was thick. For not giving up on her. On us. Zora's eyes glistened. That's not something you give up on. Family is family. She left him alone with his daughter and his thoughts. Downstairs, Mrs. Baptiste was already awake making breakfast even though the sun hadn't risen yet. She looked up when Zora came in. "How is she?" "Sleeping." Finally, Mrs. Baptiste wiped her hands on a towel. "I heard what she said about wanting to go." Zora nodded. "That poor baby." Mrs. Baptiste's voice trembled. "Carrying that all alone." "She's not alone anymore." Mrs. Baptiste studied Zora's face. "You're going to stay, aren't you? If they'll have me, they need you, both of them." Zora looked out the window. The sky was just starting to lighten, deep blue turning to gray. A new day coming. "We all need each other," she said quietly. Upstairs, Terrence finally fell asleep in a chair, his hand resting near Amara's on the blanket. And for the first time in months, neither of them was alone in their grief. But morning would bring something new, something fragile, something that looked a lot like hope. 3 weeks passed. Amara ate every meal, small portions at first, then more. The color came back to her cheeks. The light came back to her eyes. She started talking again, asking questions, telling stories, giggling at things only 3-year-olds find funny. The townhouse that felt like a tomb started to feel like a home. Terrence changed, too. He stopped working 16-hour days, started coming home for dinner. Every night he read to Amara before bed, tucked her in, stayed until she fell asleep. And on Sundays they made cornbread together. That became their thing, their ritual. Amara would stand on a step stool at the counter, carefully pouring cornmeal into the bowl, while Zora guided her hand. Terrence would man the oven, checking the bread like he'd been doing it his whole life. They'd eat at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room they never use anymore. Just the three of them, laughing and talking about nothing important. Those were the mornings Amara lived for. One Sunday, about a month after everything changed, Amara looked up from her plate. "Miss Zora?" "Yeah, baby." "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Amara's voice got quiet. "Do you think my mommy and your mom are friends in heaven?" Zora's chest tightened. "I think they're best friends." Amara smiled. "Good. Then they're not lonely." Terrence's eyes glistened, but he smiled too. After breakfast, they bundled up and walked to Holland Park a few blocks away. The air was cold, but the sun was bright. Amara ran ahead to the swings, her laughter echoing across the playground, her coils bouncing as she ran. Terrence and Zora walked slowly behind her. "I don't know how to thank you," Terrence said quietly. Zora shook her head. "You don't need to. You gave me my daughter back. She was never gone. She was just waiting for you to come home." Terrence stopped walking, looked at her. "You're not just Amara's caregiver anymore. You know that, right?" Zora met his eyes. "I know. You're family." Her voice broke. "Family." They stood there for a moment, watching Amara swing higher and higher, her joy filling the space between them. That night, after Amara was asleep, Terrence found Zora in the kitchen. She was cleaning up, humming softly to herself. "Zora." She turned. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her heart sped up. "Okay." He took a breath. "These past few weeks, having you here, watching you with Amara, seeing how you've changed everything." He paused. "I've realized something." She waited. "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air. Zora's eyes filled. "Terrence." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. You've given Amara and me so much, more than I could ever. I love you, too." He stopped. "You do?" "How could I not?" Her voice shook. "You let yourself break, so you could heal. You showed up for her. You became the father she needed. That's who I fell in love with." Terrence crossed the room and kissed her. Gentle, careful, full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When they pulled apart, both were crying and smiling at the same time. "What do we tell Amara?" Zora whispered. Terrence looked toward the stairs. "The truth, that sometimes after loss, love finds a way back." "You think she'll understand?" "I think she already knows." The next morning, Amara came into the kitchen and found them making pancakes together, holding hands. She climbed onto a stool and watched them for a long moment. Then, with the wisdom only children have, she said, "Are you going to get married?" They laughed, surprised. Terrence knelt beside her. "Maybe someday. Would that be okay with you?" Amara thought about it seriously. "Only if we still have Sunday cornbread." Zora grinned. "Forever and always." Amara nodded. "Then yes." She hopped down and hugged them both. And in that moment, in that kitchen filled with morning light, something beautiful was born. Not just healing, but hope, a future, a family. 6 months after Zora walked into that townhouse, everything looked different. Not the walls or the furniture or the windows overlooking the garden, but the life inside. Amara turned 4 in September. They threw a small party, just a few kids from her preschool, Mrs. Baptiste, and the 3 of them. No big production, no expensive entertainers, just cake and laughter, and Amara blowing out candles while everyone sang. When the last guest left, Amara climbed into Zora's lap. "Miss Zora." "Yeah, baby." "I made you something." She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Zora opened it carefully. It was a drawing, for figures holding hands. A tall man with locks, a little girl with puffs, a woman with natural hair, and a woman with an afro. At the top, in Amara's careful handwriting, "My family." Below the 4 figures, Amara had drawn a 5th one. Smaller, up in the corner with clouds around her, her mother watching over them. Zora's breath caught. Amara pointed at the drawing. "That's Mommy. She's in heaven with your mama, but she's still part of us, right?" Zora pulled her close, tears streaming. "Right, baby. Always." Amara looked up at her. "I'm glad you came here." "Me too. I think Mommy sent you." Zora kissed her forehead. "I think she did, too." That night, after Amara was asleep, Terrence and Zora stood on the back terrace. London stretched out below them, a million lights against the dark. Terrence took her hand. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About Amara. About everything." He turned to her. "I want to make this official." Zora's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Her hand flew to her mouth. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, voice shaking. "But I know this. You walked into our lives when we were drowning. You didn't just save Amara. You saved me, too. You taught me what it means to show up, to be present, to love without fear." Tears poured down her face. "I don't want to do life without you," he whispered. "Will you marry me?" She couldn't speak, just nodded. He slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her close. They stood there holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "Neither can I." 3 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at a church in Brixton, Zora's church, where her grandmother used to take her. Amara was a flower girl, just like she'd asked. She wore a white dress and carried a basket of roses, grinning the whole time. When Terrence and Zora said their vows, Amara stood between them, holding both their hands. A family, not the one any of them expected, but the one God had been building all along. That night, after the guests left and Amara was finally asleep, the 3 of them sat in the living room. Amara was curled up on the couch between them, half asleep, but refusing to go to bed. "Tell me the story again," she mumbled. "Which story?" Terrence asked. "The one about how Miss Zora came here." Zora smiled. "You've heard it 100 times. I want to hear it again." So Terrence told it, about the morning Zora arrived, about how she sat with Amara when no one else could reach her, about the cornbread that changed everything. Amara listened with her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. When he finished, she whispered, "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm glad I stayed." Terrence's throat closed. "Me too, baby. Me too." Amara opened her eyes and looked at both of them. "I think this is what Mommy wanted, for us to be happy again." Zora kissed her head. "I think you're right." Amara yawned. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" Terrence laughed. "Anything you want. And cornbread on Sunday. Always." Amara smiled and closed her eyes again. Within minutes, she was asleep. Terrence and Zora sat there watching her breathe, neither of them wanting to move. "We did it," Zora whispered. "You did it?" She shook her head. "No, we did. All of us." Terrence looked at his daughter, healthy, happy, alive, then at his wife, then at the life they'd built from the broken pieces. And for the first time in over a year, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever: peace. Outside, the London lights glowed against the night sky. But inside, in that home that had once been so cold and silent, there was warmth, there was laughter, there was love, and there was proof. Quiet, undeniable proof that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. That healing doesn't come from money or power. It comes from showing up, from sitting the pain with someone, from choosing every single day to keep living. Amara stirred in her sleep and mumbled something soft. Zora leaned close. "What did you say, baby?" Amara's eyes stayed closed, but she smiled. "I said I love you." Terrence and Zora looked at each other, tears in their eyes. "We love you, too, sweetheart," Terrence whispered. "More than you'll ever know." And in that moment, everything they'd been through, the grief, the loss, the fear, the breaking, all of it made sense because it led them here, to this family, to this home, to this love that was stronger for having been tested. The tech mogul's daughter hadn't eaten in 2 weeks. But that wasn't really the story. The story was what happened after. When a humble woman from Brixton walked into a broken home in Notting Hill and reminded everyone inside that they were worth fighting for, that love doesn't give up, and that sometimes God's greatest miracles don't look like miracles at all. They look like strangers who become family, like cornbread on Sunday mornings, like a little girl learning to live again, and like a father who finally came home.